welcome back to another episode of Is Anybody Out There? This is episode 5. It's a little bit of an extension from the previous episode about anger. We're transitioning over to disappointment and grief. This is what we're planning to talk about today. You want
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ty. So, as we said last time, we focused a lot
to?
about anger. And when we're disappointed, we can feel sadness or anger is kind of the two reactions that I can think of that are probably the most common, or maybe a mix of both. And so, yeah, I guess I wanted to talk about, the facts are important, I would say. And so I guess we have to acknowledge the fact that in life, we are going to experience disappointment, some perhaps more than others. I know I've felt a lot of disappointment in my life. I've been disappointed in myself. I've been disappointed in others. And I've had those two reactions of going away and feeling sad. And then the other one is kind of being, for lack of a better word, galvanized by the anger. So, there it's like that rage, Ty, you were talking about last time, that it almost like provides a suit of armor for you,
Because it's like you only have the two options. There's more. It's more complicated, but essentially, it's like you either have defeat or you have anger, and it looks and feels better to you, right? And so, feeling the defeat and the pain and the sadness is scary. It's a scary thing to look at. It's so much easier to be angry at it, to blame it onto something else, to blame it on the world, blame it on life being unfair. It's easier to do that than to actually process the disappointment, right? And I think a lot of what disappointment comes from is expectations, the expectations we put onto the world, and it's necessarily that we have unrealistic expectations. It's that we put so much. Hope is not the word I want to use, but we put so much of our, I guess, we put all of our eggs in one basket in the expectations of something turning out the way we expected. So, and when it doesn't, like, what are we left with? And so, things would be easier if we could approach things with a more, I guess, open view of things, because the more expectations we put on things, the returns are so poor. If you know what I mean, we hurt more when we have those expectations. And it's not to say don't hope for the best. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that things happen that are out of our control, and I guess that's where disappointment comes in. We lose control. We lose that control of the outcome. We don't have that power anymore. And I feel like that is somewhere where anger does come from, is the fact that we lost that power and we have a sense of a lack of control when things don't go as expected. At least for me, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also add to that by saying that it's not like in the sense of other people. Totally, I would agree. But then there's also the disappointment in ourselves that can come up. And so in those circumstances, I think the tendency would be to think, I could have done that. It was in my control, and I screwed it all up, right? And for me personally, I don't know how you feel, Ty, or everyone else, but in my own life, I can't think of a time where my own disappointment and my disappointment in others was actually completely separate. I feel like most of the times that I've been let down by others, I feel also like I could have done things differently, made the situation or whatever, it could have been done differently with a different outcome. And so I guess, those two things kind of added up for me. And then of course, the anger grows bigger. And then, this idea of, I'm going to speak for myself here of losing trust completely in other people, because I can definitely confess that throughout my life, not now where I'm at now, but as a younger teen, angry guy, I felt let down by everyone and kind of blamed the world for all my problems. And the reality too is with disappointment. It's good. Our lives are going to be full, like I said, of some type of disappointment at some point.
It's unavoidable. It's unavoidable.
Yeah, and Yeah, part of it is, I think, we were talking about kind of expectations. So, the question that kind of came to my mind, and I actually don't know the answer, but it's from what you were saying is, um, when you were speaking about expectation, and I was thinking, okay, but so you were saying that, it's not that we shouldn't have high expectations, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's like
it's
you have
hard.
to be realistic, but at the same time optimistic. And so, there's an interesting line between those two, right? How could you be realistic, acknowledging all the little factors at play, um, and what might happen if you do this, kind of like a game of chess. And then, yeah, the other aspect is I don't want to live as somebody who has no expectations either,
Of
or
course, of
who
course, of
assumes
course.
that the world is going to let me down. But I guess part of it is making peace, at least for me, and making peace with the fact that, yeah,
It's you gotta make peace with the fact that things can turn out any way possible, and you
yeah,
don't have 100% control over that.
yeah,
You have to make peace with yourself that you're only human. You have to understand you're only human. So you know what? You might have undershot, and it might be on. If you're only human, you can only do so much, and so you can't control everything, and you can only do so much. So
yeah,
always hope for the best. Always strive for the best. But understand that things are not always going to work out as planned. I
yeah,
guess where the optimism comes in, where the optimism meets the realism is, uh, in reality, you understand that anything could possibly happen, right? Where the optimism comes in is that you realize, okay, if something does happen that is not necessarily positive, there's
hmm,
still time to turn it around. You can still make another move. You can still do something else. There's always going to be another way to go about doing things. And there's always different avenues. There's always going to be avenues for you. And I guess that's where the optimism comes in. And you gotta kind of merge the two together in order to be difficult for
that's a good
a
point.
functioning adult. You know what I mean? You have
Yeah,
to merge optimism with realism. And I guess there really is no room for pessimism because you gotta be as realistic as possible while still maintaining a positive outlook. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
It's the only app, right? Life is complicated. So other
yeah, yeah. And I think as well, I mean, the fact that we're all human is, you start to record. I think sometimes my expectation of myself are kind of inhuman expectations.
of
I'm,
course.
as if I'm supposed to be a superhero who can, have 8 arms and, do all these different things. And so I forget that. And when I forget that I'm human, and then the other thing, at least with disappointment, and I'll say, maybe in terms of like supervising a team at, a grocery store or something like that, in leadership roles, I think sometimes, what makes sense to me doesn't necessarily make sense to others,
Yeah,
is
I
my
know
point,
what.
you know? And my strengths are elsewhere. So if you ask me to do mathematical equations and balance a cash till and all that, I'd find that really hard. Um, and I would probably disappoint definitely myself. Um, but in terms of dealing with customers, that's where I feel the most at home and comfortable in my own skin. Yeah, so it's all about understanding where everybody's strengths lie, and if we have that kind of view of looking at the world as if acknowledging that everybody's good at something, I feel is like one of the first steps to overcoming disappointment and to try to see the good in others before the bad. Easier said than done. And then this whole idea of, I mean, I don't want to sound negative, but I don't think it is negative. I think it's
No, well,
this idea that um, the world is a harsh place, and it is a reality, I think. And I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I will say that at the same time as acknowledging that the world is a rough place, and harsh, and sometimes cruel and unfair, there's a lot of good going on. So it's really a matter of finding that good and aligning yourself with that good and overcome these various disappointments which occur throughout our lives.
like in a sense like that, in terms of like disappointment, this is kind of how I look at things like that. Um, it's like I look at every great thing that ever been done by anyone ever,
Yeah.
and they've all been done by people who had the delusional idea that they could use mountains if they tried. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they probably met as many roadblocks as everybody else.
Yeah.
They just didn't believe that it was going to stop them, right? And so it's almost, that's what I said, like, well, realism meets optimism, right? Is they meet a roadblock, and that's disappointing. They met that roadblock, but they are optimistic enough to believe that there's an alternative app. So they just keep trying. They just try a different way, differently. It's kind of, I guess you can call it perseverance, right? Is how you get over that. Perseverance and acceptance, right? You accept a situation at end, and you look towards the future. And I'm not. They say a lot about living in the present is very important, right? And in my opinion, I believe that, I guess, the future is where you're aspiring to me. That is where you want your present to be. You know what I mean? And it's so, like, having these dreams and these aspirations is something that keeps us going and keeps us motivated. But you're going to be disappointed along the way, right? You're going to meet disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, and it's going to be discouraging. And you're going to want to lay it on something else. You're going to be angry. You're going to be frustrated. But you have to sort of be optimistic enough to believe that there's a way to get there. You know what I mean? And even if that's not necessarily where you end up, there is somewhere to get. You know, that's important. That is an important belief to have in order to keep going, is to believe that there is somewhere to get. Anywhere. It doesn't matter. There's just that there's somewhere to get. And so having that belief and that hope, you know, that is where you persevere, where you push through, where you accept the disappointment and you say, okay, I still have a goal. I still have somewhere to go. And so you can't, when you wallow in the disappointment, that's just soul crushing. That is corroding the soul. It's going to eat at you. You have to, it's hard to put it because not everybody can win. You know what I mean? Everything. But there is, I believe, a possible place of success for everyone. So I believe that having the belief that there can be something positive is something that we should aspire to towards the future and move forward despite the roadblocks that we experience. And I guess that is where the optimism does come in that belief. That, at least in my opinion, that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
I that's about a lot of things.
No, and that's important. Having dreams and having a vision is important. And I would say also, when you were talking about, you know, these, we'll say, like, figures throughout history who've done, you know, amazing things, whether it was building, you know, the pyramids or, you know, cities and, you know, the Great Wall of China, whatever, you know, these people, as you mentioned, you know, were probably disappointed throughout the way, or they definitely were 100%. They hit roadblocks. Yeah. But also, one of the things that they did, it's not like they could have built these things themselves, not accomplished these things themselves. No. So at a certain point, they would have to, in order to move on with the project, to acknowledge the various disappointments that they felt, you know, others could have pulled their weight in this way or done things differently. And those people had expectations of the leaders as well. But in order to actually accomplish the goal, everybody had to say, okay, well, let's regroup and figure out how to continue. Yeah. So it's not just about, I think, this idea of disappointment. It's not just about this, but also recognizing how vital, you know, accepting disappointment and learning how to work around it and work with others, like how essential that is to accomplishing any big goal.
So the disappointment is essentially like the ultimate roadblock. You know what I mean? That is the ultimate roadblock. Not even the problem that arises or the unfortunate circumstances. It's not that. It's the feeling of disappointment that is the ultimate roadblock to your progress and your success. Because if you don't accept it, if you don't acknowledge it, if you don't process it, how are you going to move on from it? Right now, you're stuck at this roadblock, ruminating over your misfortune instead of looking towards progressing. And that's not even to put down anyone. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is that is a realistic human roadblock that we have to overcome in order to better ourselves, even in interpersonal relationships, right? Where it's you put your trust in somebody, and that person may have betrayed your trust, then it's like, if you can't process that and move on from it, you're never going to be able to establish another strong relationship. And ultimately, the person who did betray your trust, they'll move on and they'll be fine. You let what they did be the roadblock that destroyed all of your future relationships. And another thought on that is, you can't necessarily expect somebody else to treat you the same way that you treat them. You know, like even me, I have the tendency to, I guess, like over help, over coddle, like protect, over affectionate in certain aspects, and I can't expect that same treatment. I can't expect that same treatment back because people are human. You know what I mean? But then you'll be like, somebody might say something offhanded that is really mindful, but you'll be like, I would never say that to you. I would never do that to you. How could you say that to me? But it really isn't something that serious. But you have these expectations because of how you act, and you expect to be treated 1,000% the same way, and it doesn't always necessarily work that way. People are human and people are flawed, and people are definitely going to support you. They're going to forget anniversaries, birthdays, you know, they're going to forget special events. They're going to be late with things. Well, they're not always going to be happy. They're not always going to be loving towards you. And I'm not saying that accept poor behavior. I'm saying to be realistic when you look at your relationships, in that not everybody is perfect. You can't have that expectation. Even when you get in a relationship, you can't expect that it's going to be the perfect, ideal relationship. Things are up and down. They happen, and you kind of, in order to beat really disappointment, is to kind of ride the wave of life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To go with the motion of life and accept the fact that we're all in the same ocean. You know what I mean? We're all in the same ocean, and life is just a ride. Because the harder the lines that we put, and I'm not talking about boundaries, I'm just talking about these hard expectation lines. The harder the lines we put, the more bumpy your ride's gonna be. Because no one's going to be able to meet those rigid expectations that you have. Yeah. Right? At least that's what I've experienced in my life.
Yeah. And compromise as another.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then kind of moving on to the idea of kind of grief. What I was going to say to kind of segue into that was that it's okay to feel hurt. And, you know, at the moments when people let you down and you feel disappointment. Again, I feel like that's just part of the process, and it's actually quite helpful to acknowledge that you're hurt. At the same time, again, you know, you have to be mindful. We have to be mindful that we have to move on past that. Whether it's a small thing like, you know, grieving that your best friend, you know, stole something from you, or with your girlfriend, or whatever it is, right? Like, that's okay. And then you've got to think, okay, so how am I going to move forward from this? So I guess my point is there's always a time to grieve, and then there's a time to recuperate, and if you're working with others, regroup and reassess, and then from there on to bigger and better things and living a fuller life.
Grief is not a place you want to wallow. It's not a place you want to wallow.
Yeah.
Grief can take very many forms. Yeah. People often associate grief with death, which that's not always the case. It's not always the case. People who've been in long-term relationships and then those relationships end, they grieve the loss of that relationship, the loss of the life that they had, the world that they had is gone. They feel uprooted and disjointed from everything else. Now they've lost their place in the world, and so it's okay to grieve over that. That is still a grief to have.
Yeah.
It's just loss is hard to deal with, and I always bring a lot of things back to control. It makes you feel powerless when you lose these things. That's why disappointment and abuse kind of are very similar. You end up feeling powerless over the circumstances that happened. It's vulnerable. You feel vulnerable, and like how we're talking about previously, anger really does tend to come out when we feel most vulnerable. it's understandable why that would be the emotion you resort to when you're feeling these feelings, because it's almost like you said, like a shield. It protects you from these things that make you feel vulnerable. And even for some reason is an emotion that makes us feel kind of powerful, when in reality that is probably our weakest, most erratic points. You know what I mean? That is where we are the least equipped to handle things. But like in our heads, we believe that is a position of power, but it's really not. You're just trying to you're just raging at everything. You are upset with everything, but you're not actually processing the pain fully. And that's not to say that anger is not a thing that you, not an emotion that you process. But what I'm saying is like all these things, all these facets of what's going on, are not processing it. You're just blindly being enraged by circumstances. And a lot of it comes down to, again, like you said, the acceptance of the lack of control. A lot of things um can be handled better when we fully accept the fact that we are not in control of everything. We're only human.
You're
We're
cutting out
malleable.
completely.
Sorry. We're only human, where we are not perfect, right? And so once we can accept that, and accept that other people aren't perfect, and accept that everything, it's like a chaos, right? Everything just happens, and sure, there's on effect and stuff, thing starts this, starts this, starts this, that is true, but things do just happen, and the world is very unpredictable, and the sooner that we can accept the unpredictability of the world, the easier it is to look at things and be like, okay, and put them into perspective in a way that it's not as big as we internalize it to be. You know what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of. No, I mean, what you said was interesting, and I think it's at least, everything you said is kind of relatable to, like, I can relate to it myself, and even in terms of, like, I was let down the day I realized I wasn't a kid anymore. You know what I mean? And or the day I realized my parents don't know everything, or the first day I used drugs. Whatever. There were all these disappointments in my life that I couldn't get over, and then a huge part of my gaining sobriety was getting over them, or at least acknowledging that there's nothing I can do about it. These factors are out of my control. But then again, what is in my control is whether I move on or not. That's in my control. And to realize that it's a process. It's a process.
It's a process, right? It's a process, and like it's hard to explain, because it's not like I'm trying to say do not try and take control of your life.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say that the world is capricious and things just happen that we can't even plan for. And even if we do plan for them, they might just happen regardless of how prepped we are for it. The unexpected happens, and it's just all about kind of just being prepared.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to say keep control and let go of control. Like, that's why life is complicated. You know what I mean? Life is very complicated.
To keep control of what we can control, and then to understand that there are things that we won't be able to control, and then we'll have to figure out how to control our reaction to those things.
Yeah.
You
can only control your reaction. You can only control how you react to it, and that is the only thing that is within your power, is to control how you react and how you move to the waves of the ocean. And that's it. That's all you've got. That in itself is its own superpower. You know what I mean? It's your own superpower, because at least in that way, you are at least in control of you. You are at least in control of you, and that is as far as you can go. That is the depth of your power. You are in control of you. So when you receive something, you are in control of how you process that, and that in itself is that is your power. That is your power. That is your strength, to be able to react to what you receive. That's in my opinion.
Right. And then I think another aspect is, when we can control our own reaction, that will help us jump into action when it comes to supporting others when their boats get rocked or the boats you're in with other people get rocked, right? So it's all about, like the idea of kind of getting out of quicksand and the more you struggle and flail about, the less you can actually get out. So you have to kind of, think clearly about what's going on, and then assess what can you do, and then once you understand what you can do, then it's like, okay, well, now I can start thinking about other people, how I can support them.
It's hard because a lot of people feel like that's selfish, but it's really not. You can't save the world without first saving yourself. You got to get in the boat before you can start throwing out the lifeline and pull people into the boat. And so it literally does start with you. You are the foundation, right? Everybody is essentially the foundation of their relationships with other people, right? And it starts with you. And the better position that you put yourself in opens up these avenues to strengthen these other relationships that you have with other people, right? You can't really be emotionally available for other people if you are not, have not or are not in the process of working on your own emotions as well. Things like that. It really does start with you, and then it branches out. As self-centered as it seems, you are kind of the center of the universe, and in that way, you can make everything better flowing outwards. You know what I mean? That's how I look at it. And that's
100%. And if that disappoints others, then they'll have to work through that. And hopefully eventually see, when he was level-headed and he wasn't thinking about me, he was thinking about me. It's just, he had to figure out his own stuff before he helped me. Nobody can do what they got to do in their life when they're spread too thin. So, if that's being selfish, or then it just has to run its course, and one day they'll react and they'll say, "Oh."
But that's where I'm at right now, and it's like the question is rough. Is I've got a lot of my life stuff going on right now, and so and here I apologize to you too. I'm not as active in the way I want to be, but it's like I really do have a lot of important things in my life that I gotta address.
100%.
And so I'm disappointed in myself because I feel like I've taken so many steps backwards in the last few weeks. But in reality, I might not be in the best position to be able to do all the things I need to do. I have to kind of handle what I've got going on right now. And then come back and contribute. But again, it's the disappointment, and then like you said, how their head and ass, the disappointment, and then there's the grief in myself. I'm feeling like I lost a part of myself. Like I'm just the better part of me, the good part of me. I lost that part of myself. And so I mourn. I'm sad. I'm saddened by it. And then I take anything and upset about it. And it's just the cycle of self-loathing. That's what we gotta break. The cycle of self-loathing, right? We gotta break that cycle of self-loathing, which is very hard to do when you have these high expectations of yourself.
Yeah, and I think we have to just, as humans, kind of, figure out in order to move forward. Figure out, what is most important to do at the time, and then work through a list. What's the most important thing? Work through that next important thing, and then that's how we get on. But it takes planning and all of that. But for sure, I can relate.
It's trial and error. It's trial and error.
Yeah, we're just living it, man. Figuring it out sometimes as we go, for sure.
Well, we're at 33, 32. We want to go.
I'd say let's end off here, and then again, we'll talk soon with everyone else.
All right. Send us off, buddy.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Ty for another great conversation, giving everyone a kind of a glimpse into your mind. It's very interesting. I can relate in many ways. All right. Thanks everyone.
All right. Sign it out. All right, man. There we